Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 267, and I had a conversation with Paul Evans Pedersen Jr. He is an author and a journalist and a folklorist and a retired fireman and a Grammy Award nominated singer-songwriter, performer person. Lots of things, lots of quills in his hat. He wrote a book called The Legendary Pine Barrens, New Tales from Old Haunts, and it is about the ghost, goblin-y, folklore-y stories in and around the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. Real fun talking with him. We covered all sorts of things, from what it was like to be a firefighter for his whole career. We talked about arsonists. We talked about ghost stories from his childhood. We talked about aliens and technology, all sorts of fun stuff. So I think you're going to dig this episode. The usual stuff, Hey Human Podcast social media can be found on Facebook and Instagram with just typing in Hey Human Podcast. Easy breezy. You can find my personal social media under Susan Ruthism, SUSANRUTHISM. That's Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can email me, susan@heyhumanpodcast.com. While you're on heyhumanpodcast.com, you don't have to be on there to email me. I'm just saying that if you happen to go to heyhumanpodcast.com, you will find a links page. The links page has tons of information about every guest I've ever had, and you can find links to books and websites and articles and all sorts of things. So definitely check that out. You'll also find the storefront there on heyhumanpodcast.com. You can get t-shirts and hats and all sorts of fun things that help support Hey Human. Another great way to support Hey Human Podcast is to rate and review it on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to check out more stuff I do, go to susanruth.com. You can sign up on the mailing list there. Check out my artwork, music, that kind of thing. If you're into music, go to iTunes or Spotify and you'll find me under Susan Ruth. So many places to find me that if you left a rock, there I'll be. Okay, that's about that for that information. Oh, I will tell you, I've been watching The Young Pope on HBO. It's really great. Really, really great. I know I'm late to the party on that one, but holy moly. Sorry if you can hear cars in the background here. I'm traveling right now. But anyway, it's so good. And it really makes you think about the nature of God, the nature of faith, just the flaws of humanity, where we are in our hearts and our minds. And I don't know, I'm really digging it a lot. The writing is excellent. The acting is phenomenal. So if you're into that kind of thing, check out The Young Pope. It's great. I think that's about it. Enjoy this conversation with Paul. We recorded it, by the way, last winter, so it's been a minute to try and get this one to the front of the queue, but here it is now. Thanks for listening. Be well. Be kind. Thank you. And here we go. Paul Evans Pedersen Jr., welcome to Hey Human.
It's nice to be here.
That's a Scandinavian spelling, is it not?
Yep, it's Norwegian.
Yeah.
Yep.
Lots of E's and things.
The family is from Tiomé, Norway, which is a little bit southwest of Oslo. And yeah, we had one Pedersen come over, or try to come over on April 14th, 14, on the Titanic. And of course she didn't make it. One of the brothers, yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's quite a historical moment.
Yes.
Where did you grow up? Were you U.S.?
I grew up actually in a couple towns. I grew up in, I was born in Collingswood. My parents moved to Haddon Heights until I was 7. Then we moved to Haddonfield until I was 11. Haddonfield was great. Haddonfield is very, very historical, colonial, settled in the 1600s South Jersey town. And I really liked living there. And then we moved to Collingswood, where I stayed until I moved to Houston when I was 25. And I moved to Houston to be in the fire department. and was there for 5 years. But yeah, the time in Haddonfield, I mean, that house, you want to talk about a haunted house. That was a haunted house.
Did you have experiences in there then?
Oh yeah, very active. Very active. I've written songs about that place, and it's a historical part of Haddonfield and a historical part of New Jersey.
Who was haunting it, do you know?
I believe the man that hung himself in our garage. He hung himself in 1955, which is when I was born. And when we moved there, it was to rent the house because his widow couldn't live there anymore. And I mean, the stories I heard were crazy. But she had come home from the store and opened the garage, and there he was hanging.
Oh, awful.
Yeah. And when we moved in there, we had a lot of people tell us halfway, not crazy, but halfway kidding around, make sure you watch out for Mr. Staritis. And they kept telling us that, Mr. Staritis, because we didn't know the neighbors quite yet, and some kids come running up our steps a couple weeks after we moved in and said, he's out here. And sure enough, there was a guy in a car that would stare at our house for no reason. And this was, 1963, 64. So you didn't have immediate communications. And my mother would call the police, and by the time they got there, he'd already left. And we would write down his tag number, and they would come back and say, well, no tag exists. And it would take a couple days for him to do that because you didn't have instant, like I said, communications like we do now. And we never found out who he was, but I found a picture in a toolbox, and it was him. The guy in that car was, I won't say the name, but it was him. It was a picture of him.
Of the guy that hung himself?
That hung himself, yeah. I mean, now, so many things happened on that street when I lived there. We were there for 4 years. And it's right where they found the first dinosaur bones in the United States, the Hadrosaurus. And I played probably on top of more of them, because our street would go down my street and turn left, and that would be the bottom of Springfield Terrace. It was a hill, and when you got to the end of the hill, there was a 40-foot drop into woods that were around Evans Pond, which that's all still there. And who knows, we found milk bottles, and we found all kinds of old Indian relics and stuff. And there was a little path that would go down there. We called it Dead Man's Hill, because that's where I would sled in the winter. And off to the left of Dead Man's Hill was a spring, and we either called it Salamander Pond or Indian Springs. It had a couple names. And we would drink out of it every time we went down there and catch salamanders. And while I was looking for a salamander, I found this perfectly round rock, and put the rock in my pocket, and we were walking up the street to go back home, and I threw it, like tossing it up, seeing how heavy it was. I dropped it, and it broke, and inside of it was a gold coin.
Oh my goodness.
And come to find out that that's how the pirates would disguise gold and camouflage their gold, is wrap it in clay, put it, and then bury it somewhere where they knew where it was, but nobody else could ever find it. Who would think you would find it? They probably thought it was at the bottom of a well. And that thing there was rocks around the Salamander Pond, and it was a really neat place.
Did you go back and get more?
No, you know what? I never did. It caused such a stir when I was a kid. I was in the Boy Scouts, and I had the scout leader. I'll give you $1 for it. And then somebody else in that troop would say, well, we'll give you $1.10. And my father kept it. And you know what? I never found out what happened to it. I mean, he's passed on, so, who knows?
Wow.
Yeah, it could be somewhere in my mother's possessions to this day. It's just one of them things.
That's wild. Imagine what it's worth today.
Oh my Lord! If that, an ounce of gold, what is it? $1,800 an ounce?
Yeah.
But just what it was, because it had weird markings on it, and it several crosses, and so who knows what it was.
So it sounds like perhaps it's Spanish if it had crosses on it.
I was just going to say it could have been a doubloon,
Yeah.
or a Spanish piece of aid, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But, it was great.
Did you ever interact with the man in the house on your own, besides like in the yard or whatnot?
He would stand. He would stand at the end of that driveway where the garage was in the summer and whistle. And it was freaky, and I've heard it before, and it stops me in my tracks. And I wrote a song called Black Plaid Curtains, because when we moved in that house, there was a part past the kitchen in the back of the house. On the windows were black plaid curtains, so that's the name of the song. But that song was all about this guy, and I swear it was it was him. And he would whistle this really crazy, haunting melody, and just stand there, and I would see him standing there. And I would tell my parents, and they'd, "Oh, you're just telling a story. You don't really hear that." And it was like, I can't believe these people don't hear this. Why doesn't anybody else in the household hear this? Because I surely heard it. I'm sorry.
Do you think that a childhood that experienced these sorts of things, Spanish doubloons and ghosts, and that created the environment for you to grow into a folklorist?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was a bedrock for it. Because I would tell. I walked to school, and I made a friend. His name was Glenn. And I went and picked up Glenn, which when I say pick up, I go to his house, meet him, and we walk together. I went and picked up Glenn one morning, and his father was a huge real estate salesman. It had a very, very lucrative and large real estate firm in South Jersey. And I met his father at his dining room table, and he says, "So what do you do?" And he's asking me this question and that question, and I brought up the stuff about the house and the coin, and he's looking at me like, this is a nut. And he actually told his son, "You're not walking to school with this kid." So it kind of, when I was young, it kind of worked against me, because people thought I was crazy or just, slinging the bull. And I started writing this stuff down in second grade. And me and a kid named Alan Hardigan, or Tommy, oh man, I can't remember his last name. But our little storybook was called Tom and Paul's Tall Tales. And it was a mixing of these things that would happen, but we embellished it a little bit and added, and that started me off in writing and telling stories. And it doesn't absolutely fall into the folklore. It was more of a reportage type of thing, where most of it was facts, but we mixed a little, and that's kind of how I write and tell my stories. Most of my stories are based in truth, and then I add a little bit to it. So it's kind of like, the suspension of disbelief. How far can you take that? Where can you go with that suspension of disbelief? And I think that's what makes a good storyteller.
So you've always been a storyteller from the get-go. Yep. Did you study literature or anything like that in college, or did you just go?
No. I always liked to write. I always liked, words in the English language and stuff. I went to college to be a firefighter. The time I spent in college was in the University of Houston, and you had to go, and you got 72 credits for the academy, the time you spent learning about fire suppression. And then I did some more schooling for hazmat, hazardous materials containment and stuff like that. But I got an associate's degree out of it, but that was it. It was for fire suppression, not for literature or English or anything like that.
Did you retire from firefighting, or did you only do that? Okay.
Yep. No, I would like to still do it. I played Santa Claus this year on a fire truck. I volunteered for the town I live in, and it was great to get on that fire truck again.
Yeah.
It really sparked the thing, like, man, I miss this.
Yeah.
But, I'm not really wanting to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and jump on a fire truck when it's 12 degrees out. Let's let the younger guys do that now.
What interested me, so our mutual friend Christian Barth told me about you and sent me a link to your book, The Legendary Pine Barrens, and told me a little bit about you. And what intrigued me to talk with you was the idea of the storyteller, because I think it is it's an art that is losing momentum, and it's a beautiful art, and so many of our stories that are passed down from generation to generation, those are getting lost, and especially in whatever white culture is, and that I don't think that that's a real prevalent storytelling environment. Yeah.
It's really a shame, because South Jersey had storytellers as far back as the 1600s, and storytellers would walk from village to village. I mean, they weren't even villages then. Some of them, they were like encampments. And if they couldn't work or didn't want to work or whatever, they would tell stories, and people would either feed them or give them a little bit of money, just even for food was great. And that's all they did. They would wander around and tell stories. And, of course, I'm sure that's how a lot of our legends here in South Jersey got started and grew, because it doesn't matter where in South Jersey you are, you're going to hear the same story about the Jersey Devil. There's two versions of it, and you're going to hear one of them, and some people get real mad when you tell the one. There's two of them, and one of them has the Jersey Devil being born to Mother Leeds, and there's always a big argument. Well, what was her name? Deborah? No, it was this. No, so that's a whole thing in itself. What was Mother Leeds' first name? And that's why I go by Mother Leeds. I just call her Mother Leeds. That's why there's no argument. But then you have to worry about, well, who was her husband? Well, he was a pirate. No, he wasn't. He was a town drunk. So going into it, you're going to have a controversy right from the first minute of telling the story. But the two versions are, in a nutshell, one of them, he flew out the chimney after he was born. He morphed into the creature. As soon as he was born, sprouted two wings, the head of a horse, killed everybody in the room, flew out the chimney, and was gone into the night. And the second version is he didn't kill everybody in the room, and he was born normal. And then as the night wore on, he turned into the Jersey Devil slowly and didn't kill anybody. They still flew out the chimney. Now, some people will tell you he's got red eyes. Some legends have that he breathes fire. And you're going to hear, you can't breathe fire. You hear all kinds of different things, and I believe that is from storytellers. Each storyteller adding a little thing to make his story more believable. And I was actually going to leave the Jersey Devil. I had no plans of writing a story about the Jersey Devil when I wrote that book. I purposely left it out because it's been done to death. And my publisher, John Bryans, the Christian knows, he said, you got to have a Jersey Devil story. I said, John, come on, there's too many of them. He goes, put your taste on one, put your twist into it. So I was in my pool, and I saw two birds, a light on the side of my pool, and I guess it was hump day. And I'm sitting there watching. I thought, what would happen if that kind of like oozed into my pool and got in the filter, and the water's nice and warm? It could act like a womb, and that's exactly how I wrote my version of how the Jersey Devil came to be. So it was, laying there in the pool one afternoon and seeing nature happen, and that's how I got my version of the Jersey Devil. And it makes perfect sense to me.
How did you pick your stories for the legends?
My stories were picked, most of them were stories that I would tell my kids as I was riding around in the Pine Barrens. and stories that I had heard from my father, who I guess taught me how about storytelling. Because every time we would go to bed, me and my sister, Dad, tell us a story. And he could tell a story on the fly. It was amazing. And he would just come up with these crazy stories. And we would fall asleep with him telling us these stories. He had the knack. And every time he would tell them, he would lay us down, tuck us in or whatever, and he'd go, so, here's my story. And I'm actually going back to writing for a paper here in Hamilton, the Hamilton Gazette, and I'm going to call my column, so here's my story.
Love it.
But that's how he started every one, so here's my story.
Well, I mean, it's in your DNA, right? Scandinavians are famous for their storytelling.
Yep. So it's passed down. It's, I got that and drumming from my uncle Norm. He was a great drummer. And I picked that trade up and talent when I was 12.
I'd love to hear a firefighting story.
Oh, the firefighting story?
Yeah.
Oh, man, there's so many of them. We rolled up on a house one time, and the place was really, really burning. And we got inside, and we found prophylactics stuffed with sterno all over the ceiling. And we got there just in time before they all took off. It was really a crazy way to start a fire.
So that's an ingenious way to be arsonists, is to stuff condoms full of sterno.
Yep. Oh, you can't believe the way people start fires. It's amazing. I did a little work on the arson squad in Houston. And well, not talent, I guess, but that's the word for it. The talent people have to put together ways of starting fire. It's amazing. It's amazing. But this particular fire I'm talking about, but you know what? The twist of the story is who the house belonged to, and I probably shouldn't go there. Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, we put the fire out. Before we did, me and a lieutenant got caught on a boardwalk, a catwalk that went all the way around the house. And I got smoke inhalation real bad. And I went to the hospital over that. And that was quite a fire. And it turned out that the house belonged to the guy that owns Hires Root Beer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think, and a lot of people thought at the time that the house was Tiny Tim's. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I know who Tiny Tim. Sure.
Yeah, and so it was that was a bad fire. Bad fire.
Do people, in your experience, start fires to get insurance money or to hide nefarious doings?
Both.
Okay.
Both. The first time I found a body, it was after the fire was out, and we were searching around, for hot spots and stuff. And I felt I was moving my hands around on the floor. I was on the floor, and I got to a bedroom, and I started feeling around under the bed, and sure enough, there was a guy. And so I went and got my captain and the lieutenant, and they cleared the room of smoke. And as they were moving stuff, everybody stopped and said, "Don't touch him, don't move. This is a cover-up." And we said, "Well, what do you mean it's a cover-up? How do you know? The guy's dead. He's probably under there hiding from the fire." He goes, "You wouldn't have found him on his back if he was hiding from the fire. And here he'd been shot. And somebody put him under the bed. If they would have put him under the bed laying on his stomach, nobody would have gave it a second thought. But that's how that guy got caught.
Interesting.
Because he had the body on his back. When you're searching for air, when you're begging for air, you put your face right on the floor. I've had to do it a couple times. And it's a scary, scary situation. But there's no way you would roll on your back under a bed if you were trying to hide from fire.
Yeah.
And that's how he got caught.
Interesting.
It's usually really dopey things that people do that get them caught. You find that in crime and arson. And like I said before, the stuff people do to hurt other people in fires. Like we had an arsonist in Houston, in the downtown ward, first ward, that would cut a hole in the floor of the house and cover it with a rug. So when the firemen went in, and a guy that I went all through the academy with died in a situation like that. He fell through the floor to the basement. And they were booby traps. I mean, we've been shot at. It's amazing what fire department people go through, your first responders. Because you have a badge and a uniform and they associate you with law enforcement and the police. And, I mean, there you are riding on an open truck. If some nut wants to... We've had people go to the fire hydrant and fill the fire hydrant with cans and rocks so that when the pumper hooks up to it, it completely blows the impeller in the... Yep. Wow. Or they'll take hammers and beat the threads off of the fire hydrants so you can't hook up to it. So people have ingenious ways of, facing or committing destruction. It's amazing.
You've probably seen a lot of good things too, though, I hope.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've seen a lot of people, helped a lot of people and saved a couple lives. I've done CPR a couple times. I've had an experience where we pulled a kid out of a car wreck, and I mean he was hurt bad, and I held him in my arms. I told him, I said, "Look for the light," and he was gone that fast. So that makes you think. It really does.
Have you ever I've read about firefighters, because they are the first responders on a scene, having experiences with people coming up to the car and helping the injured before anyone gets there. And then when everyone looks around for the person that helped, they're nowhere to be found. Have you had experiences with this sort of guardian angel type situations?
No, I've never seen anything like that. I know what you're talking about. I've seen some pretty crazy things. We were fighting fire all night one time. This is before I moved to Houston, and we were backed in a fire station, and I was just exhausted, dead tired. And we had army cots to sleep on. They had put army cots in the back of the engine room for the guys that were coming in, which I was one of. And I laid down on that army cot, and I felt myself going to sleep. And I saw myself sit up and get up off the cot and turned around and looked at me. I was looking at me. And it was amazing. Wow. And it was the first, time I experienced like astral projection. I didn't believe it until then. But it was a real thing. And I've had flying dreams my whole life. Like I dreamed that it's like all I have to do is make my legs move like I'm riding a bicycle, and I just fly off. It's great. I love when it happens. I can't control when it happens, which, I wish I could. I wish I could make myself have a flying dream because they're great.
You probably can. Lucid dreaming is a thing.
Yeah, well, you know what? If I could learn how to do that, I certainly would. Yeah. Because I enjoy every one of those I have, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of books about lucid dreaming, so...
Well, you know what? It's funny. I was told by some church people, when I got saved, I was told not to go near those books. When you get some real Baptists, they'll tell you that's the work of the devil. You don't want to have anything to do with it. Yeah. And it took me quite a few years until I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to read them anyway. And my curiosity got the best of me. And I got into it a little bit, but I should pursue it more, probably.
Yeah, I bet you'd be a natural at it. It sounds like you've got a bit of a lung thing. Is that from being a fireman for so long?
Yeah. Yep. Well, I've had the wheeze. People thought I did it on purpose when I was in school, and I almost got suspended for it a couple times. And I've been looked at by I don't know how many doctors. They don't know what it is. But I smoked my whole life from the time I was 11 until I'm sorry?
Wow, that's so young.
Oh, yeah. I started smoking when I was in 6th grade. As a game we used to play called Chew the Peg, right? And you played the game, and if you lost, you had to buzz a cigarette, like make the ash real long. It was crazy, but it got me hooked on them. And I was smoking from the time I was 11 till I got a knee replacement in 2011. I told the doctor, I said, when I wake up, you better have a patch on both arms because I will find a way to smoke. I used to smoke in the shower, is how bad it was.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And when I lived in Nashville, when I went down there for music, I had like 4 roommates, and they would get so mad when they would find my cigarette in the shower. Yeah, but I would never put the cigarette out. I would get out or get in the shower and smoke it, and put it up on the shelf or along where the tiles were. And yeah, should have done it, but I was a slob.
The Pine Barrens has this steeped history of all sorts of things that go bump in the night.
Oh yeah.
And I've been there, and it's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful. An ex of mine was from New Jersey, so, and I've seen like the tiny tree forests and things.
Yeah, the pygmy pines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is really something.
That's they call that the pygmy plains. And it's, if you go out Route 72, like on your way to Long Beach Island, that's where it's really prevalent. And they, to this day, have no idea why those trees grow like that. They used to say it was because of the fires, but there's fires all over the Pine Barrens. And, the trees grow to their regular height, except in that one spot. Well, because of those trees being like that, of course I had to write a story about it. And I actually had a girl that runs tours out there, and she called me up and she said, Paul, I want to thank you that I can finally tell people why the pygmy pines only grow no higher than 5 feet because of my story. And in my story, I have these they're called Chakotay chicks, and they're little elf creatures that came over on one of the Viking raids from Iceland to North America. And these Chakotay chicks, they got out of the cage. The Vikings used to eat them and keep them, in cages and take them on the journeys with them, and they would eat them. But this boatload of them escaped, and they ran and they ran and they ran. And they came down to South Jersey, and they live on pine. The only thing they eat is pine sap. And they came into this one part of the Pine Barrens, and that's where they stay, and that's why those trees are stunted. They only grow 5 feet high. It's really a crazy looking thing.
Yeah.
If you've seen it,
I have.
because it's like you're a giant in a forest, and it seemingly goes on for mile, which it does. It's a pretty big part of the Pine Barrens.
Yeah.
But yeah, the pines are a very special place. There's no place like it in the world. There's 30 different kinds of plants that grow in the Pine Barrens and nowhere else. And plants that are indigenous to, like, the New England area. The furthest south they grow is the Pine Barrens. And plants that are indigenous to the south, the furthest north they grow is the Pine Barrens. They meet right here.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah, and there's animals and salamanders and stuff, skinks that are indigenous to the Pine Barrens and nowhere else in the world. So it's a special place.
Yeah, it's
really
got its own ecosystem. Does the Jersey Devil wreak havoc, or is it just one of those things where it was born and off it flew and that was that?
No, it's been wreaking havoc since it was born. The crazy thing about the Jersey Devil is, though, even before the white man got here in the 1600s, the Lenni Lenape have a word for the Pine Barrens. It's called papoosing, and translated that means the place of the serpent. So even the Lenni Lenape have seen something in these woods as far back as their history goes. So people ask me, what is it? I say, well, it's something. People are seeing something. Now, there's all kinds of theories about what it could be. Some people think that somebody got a hammerhead bat from Australia and let it go in the Pine Barrens, and they keep doing it to, redo the legend again and again. And if you look at a hammerhead bat, it could be described as how people describe the Jersey Devil. I mean, it's got huge wings. The wingspan is like 6 foot on this. It does have the head of a horse, kind of. So it looks kind of like what people are describing. But also, there is a dimorphodon, which is a prehistoric flying creature that also looks like what people describe the Jersey Devil as. So, I mean, if there was a place on the East Coast or in the United States where something could go from one age to another, the Pine Barrens could be it, because it's got everything there for it. It's got food, it's got trillions of gallons of water, and there's places in the Pine Barrens where there's 0 people per square mile. So if something was going to hide, here on the East Coast, the Pine Barrens would be the place, absolutely. But it has wreaked havoc all over the years. In 1909, they call that Super Week, and thousands of people from Leeds Point, where it was born, all the way to Chester, Pennsylvania, saw it during this week. That ended on January 23rd, which is my birthday, by the way.
You just had a birthday.
All the books about the Jersey Devil, they will mention Super Week, and that's the week you're talking about in 1909.
Why do you think that is, that particular week is the one?
It hopped on trains. I mean, it was on the roof of trolley cars. Cops saw it. I mean, reputable people reported seeing this thing. And even the Philadelphia Zoo still has on the books a $10,000 reward for anybody that brings it dead or alive to the Philadelphia Zoo. So, and there's been people that have found skeletons and bones and stuff like that that have tried to cash in, but they can't prove it's a Jersey Devil.
Right.
You got to have the whole thing, I guess. They want the whole thing.
The whole enchilada, for sure. Yep. Is the Jersey Devil
I've heard it scream twice, and I have never heard anything like that in my life. And that's anybody that says they've seen or heard the Jersey Devil, that's the one thing everybody says, and it's the truth. You have never heard anything in the world scream like that. And it puts the fear of God into you. It really does.
How do you feel about other legends like the Loch Ness Monster or the Yetis, but the American Yetis? Bigfoot.
I believe there's people seeing something. I don't dismiss it.
Yeah.
And I think now that all these video cameras and drones, if we don't find it in a couple of years, then I'm going to start saying, well, maybe it's not, because, I mean, these drones go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I have seen some drone footage of something awful big walking around in the woods. But they're also smart enough to dodge stuff. And who knows if they can see the ultraviolet light that usually, cameras
the heat signatures, like sure.
Right, so they might know when somebody's getting close or somebody's,
Do you have an all-time favorite story you can tell?
Oh, man. An all-time favorite story.
Tell it like you were tucking me in. I want to hear it that way.
Like I was tucking you in? Like a spooky story?
Sure.
Let's see. I would tell you a story about one time I was on a Boy Scout camp out, and they took us to a place in Pennsylvania. I don't know to this day where it was, but it was a survival camp out. And it was pouring rain. I mean, it was really raining bad. So they got us to the place, and it was raining so bad they didn't want to just let us out, where there happened to be an old abandoned house. And they said, okay, for this night only, you can sleep in the house. So I guess there was 12 or 15 of us and a couple scoutmasters, and they were supposed to just drop us, but because of the way it was raining and stuff, they stayed with us. So we were all laid out in our sleeping bags on the living room floor in this place. And I guess it was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, but I woke up because I had to go to the bathroom. And I opened my eyes, and I was getting ready to get out of the sleeping bag, and there's this guy standing there staring at us. But, there's this figure standing there staring at us. And I couldn't make if it had clothes on I couldn't make out if it was a man, a woman, but it was a humanoid, and it was huge. And it was just standing there, staring at everybody laying on the floor. And as I think back on that, and then hear the stories about the Bigfoot and the Yeti, I have got to think that had to be what was, I mean, nothing else would be out there in that kind of weather, that far back in the middle of nowhere. And it just stood there and watched us. And I've always wondered, and I got in that sleeping bag and just, covered my eyes and hoped it would go away. And I wound up falling asleep, and it was gone. But I always, to this day, wonder what that was that night. Yep.
Have you ever seen a UFO or any kind of extraterrestrial?
I've seen stuff that I can't explain. When I lived in Nashville, I was sitting on the patio one night, and I saw this. It didn't blink. It was just a pinpoint of light. It actually looked like it was dodging its way through the star field. And I thought, how can that do that? And I could not believe what I was seeing. And I mean, I've seen, stuff go by real quick, and probably meteors and stuff. I was visiting my mother one time, and I left her apartment in Collingswood, and I'm getting in the car, and flying over my head, and it made no noise. It looked, the only way I can describe it is it looked like a guy sitting in a lawn chair, just floating right over top of me. And I could not figure out what it was. I still don't know what it was. So, I've seen dopey stuff like that, but I'd really love to see a craft and have it come down and land. I would love to see that.
Yeah.
I hope I'm alive when they come here. I really do.
My only experience seeing what would be considered an unidentified flying object, there were 3 of them in a triangular pattern, and I was in Nashville as well, walking my dog in the evening and looking up and watching these 3 points of light, and they maneuvered in a way that seemed, as you say, impossible, and then they flitted away. But there were 3, and they were operating in tandem, which, I mean, it was. I thought that was really something.
Yeah. I can't believe that we are the only life. When you look out there and see stars, and I've been in some places, and I mean, it's amazing how many stars. Each one of them are a sun. And there's planets. And you're telling me this is the only place? No. I can't. And I'll tell you what else convinces me that there's got to be technology that is not from Earth. About 1974, I worked as a store detective, to catch shoplifters. And I saw all these people standing around the toy aisle, the toy counter. And I mean, there were grown men going, "Ow!" and really making a commotion. So I got out of my perch, and I came over to see what was going on. And they were all looking at this thing about the size of a dinner platter that had 4 color lights on it. And it was Simon, the toy Simon.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. The year before, there was no Simon. There was nothing like it. And for us to make that quantum leap, that jump, to go from not having something that technologically amazing to having it in a space of a year, no. I never bought. After that, I really started thinking, where did this come from? And they would say, well, the technology came from Bell Labs, but, it just, for somebody like me that grew up when I did, I was born in 1955 and saw, had Tonka trucks, to come into this age of technology so fast at that point, we have to be getting help. Something so dopey as Pong. Pong came out, I was working for a vending company delivering them. Every bar in South Jersey had to have a Pong. People just could not believe.
It is fun to think that there have been a little helps here and there technologically, especially now, because granted, I think we make advances constantly from where we are, but I don't see any kind of leapfrog like there had been in the past. It's one thing
Exactly.
to build on what we have, and the technological
Yep.
advances are quite clearly building on what we have, but that big leap forward.
Yep. They say right now that they can transmit every book that's ever been written in a billionth of a second. It's hard to get my head around that.
Yeah, I know it.
I mean, and here I am talking to you.
I know. Yeah.
If somebody would have told me when I was 30 years old that this could happen,
Yeah.
I would say, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
I mean, and for me, that was the cool part about being born in the 50s, to see all this happen. We used to get on a train and ride to Philadelphia, cut class, and ride to Philadelphia to push the buttons on a phone. We couldn't believe you could call somebody by pushing a button.
Yeah.
Because we had the dials.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that during the Industrial Revolution, there were people that felt the same way as well. But there does seem something even more than when you consider the fact that you have these super speedy computers the size of, your pocket.
Yep.
And smaller.
Well, when you think about the technology in the phone that I'm holding, and they say this could have landed Apollo 11.
Yeah.
And when you look at that banks of computers it took to do that, and now you hold it in the palm of your hand, where did that come from? How can all that information be in this one little tiny thing?
But I think about that with people like the Einsteins or the Teslas or, these people where they, they seem to have a little extra of whatever.
Yep. I think something's been revealed to them. I really do. Whether it was somehow implanted or however they do. And I'm sure that if that's the case, they're watching, because, there's a movie called Contact.
Yes, I love it.
Right?
It's from a book by Carl Sagan. Yeah.
Yep. And there's a part in there where she meets her father. And one questions she asks is, how do we survive the technology? That to me is amazing to think about. Because you know what? I wonder that myself.
Yeah.
How do we survive this?
Yeah. It is an interesting quandary. Because with every step forward technologically, we lose, in some ways, some of our humanity. And now, in a weird irony, of course, we are creating AI that will encompass humanity and technology. And then what will that supersede?
Yep. You got to wonder what's coming. That's certainly the truth.
Yeah.
But hopefully, we pass down and enough people hear the storytellers that they want to carry it on.
Yeah.
But I'm so afraid. I had a couple of my grandkids in my van, and we were riding around and said, "What are we riding around for, Pop?" I said, "I want us to write a book." And I wanted them to think. And I said, "We're going to write this book about the Pine Barrens tree frog. And we're going to have her have adventures." And we actually got a book written by riding around and everybody bouncing ideas off, and I recorded it. And then I typed it and got it all together and saved it in book form. I mean, I really hope that people continue, telling stories, and the bars open back up, because that's really how, I honed my craft. I would tell stories in between sets, and I love doing that. I've always loved it, and people enjoy it. People enjoy hearing somebody tell them stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's why shows like this are popular, because we get to hear other people's stories.
That's it.
Yeah. So as a songwriter, is your music then also in that same vein where it's not just for the sake of the song, but you're actually getting stories across?
Yes. Yep. A lot of my songs, most of my songs are story songs, which when I moved to Nashville, when I did was the kiss of death, because they didn't want story songs. They wanted real commercial, hooky, you sing the chorus for 3 minutes.
Right.
And that's the kind of stuff that was selling. Stuff like Harry Chapin's, his songs, them story songs like that, and the real storytellers, song storytellers, that's my favorite stuff. But for commercial AM or FM radio, That's not what was happening.
Yeah.
But I had some success. I had a song called Cape Lonely that was actually, a story song that was recorded by Michael Mason that got as far as number 31 on Billboard, and that was my one-hit wonder. But it's funny. I moved to Nashville, and I was there on and off for 10 years. And it wasn't until I came home and started singing songs about the Pine Barrens that I got successful. I combined these songs with my book signings, and my publisher loved it. Nobody was sure it was going to work or not. Who sings at a book signing? But I started doing it, and it caught on to the fact that I had other authors learning guitar chords and stuff because they wanted to do it.
I love it.
Yeah, but I do 5 or 6 Pine Barren songs, intermingled with the stories out of my book, and it turned into a 1 hour, sometimes hour and a half show. So yeah, it really, I went a long way to learn how to you're your own fish in your own pond.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's good to do what you know and to do what you love. That's where the success lies. Do you personally think that children ghosts or adult ghosts are more scary?
Children of ghosts? Well, I'll tell you what. In the house I had in Hamilton, we lived in a farmhouse. And, this farmhouse was an old farmhouse. And I would see a little girl sitting on the 5th step of the staircase that went to the 2nd floor. And down the bottom of that staircase was a window. And she would sit on that 5th step, which would put her about as tall as she would be if she was standing in front of, and just look out the window. And I would see this all the time. And then when we got towards Halloween and Thanksgiving, I would see a man smoking a pipe going back and forth, like he was getting the meal set on the table. And I asked the landlady that owned the house, I said, let me ask you a question. She goes, what? I said, did your father smoke a pipe? And she started crying. And she said, yeah, he did. And I said, let me ask you another question. Did anybody in your family fall down them steps? And she took off. She couldn't deal with it. So I always heard that she had a sister that went down. So, that was a very active house.
Yeah.
Very active.
And clearly you have a gift. You clearly have a shining to you.
The guy liked me.
Yeah.
And I think about him a lot. And the little girl did too. But every house I've ever lived in, I knew I was going to live in that house. I knew it, as soon as we saw this house, as soon as my wife and I pulled up into this carport, I said, we're home. And these people did not like us. These 2 people that lived here, it took a couple years, and I finally feel, but my dog sees them all the time, and he doesn't like them, or they don't like him. There's a conflict with my dog and the owners that, because I'm pretty sure she died in that bedroom. I don't know where he died, but she died in the bedroom I sleep in. And for a long time, I would hear bangs. Stuff to try to scare me. Mm-hmm. Now, I haven't seen yet, but it's getting close.
How long have you lived in this house?
5 years.
Okay.
No, 6 years.
6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
Yep. But they were conflicted. The people that lived here, they stayed together for their whole, but I think they fought a lot. And yeah, I think there was some problems with her business. She was a hairdresser, and I don't know that he liked that. And I hear that he was kind of like, I guess he was getting into Alzheimer's, because he went out front here with a shotgun, towards my neighbor for putting the mailbox on the wrong side of the street.
Oh, wow.
And so I've heard some stories about him. But she's calming down. I'm not sure they know they've
died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's like when we come in the house, it's like, what are you doing in here? You know, that's the feeling I get. I still get, but it's not as bad. She's starting to accept it more.
Have you explained? Have you said out loud, "Hey, you've passed"? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I call her by name, Ethel.
Yeah.
It's all right, Ethel. And I'm not. I haven't done the whole explanation thing and tried to tell them.
Yeah.
I just don't feel yet.
Yeah.
But they're here. They're absolutely here. Yep.
You're a special guy, Paul. You got
I don't know. I had a guitar player that lived in Mount Holly, which is a very old town, and he lived in the carriage house, which was where service stuff would live. And I went over there to pick him up to take him to a gig one time, and I walked up these steps. I can say it right now. I walked up these steps, and I could not get out of that house fast enough. Oh, I told her, I said, Jesse, there's something in that house that I'm not getting along with. And I could not. There's places that I can't go in. There's a part of the Berlin Mark, which is a huge store. Woo! I don't know what happened there, but when I get there, it's only in front of this one place. I get this bad vibe. Horrible. And so I go out of my way not to go in that part of the Berlin Mark. I don't, who knows if it's a future thing? I don't know.
Wow.
I always listen to my gut feelings.
Yeah.
And it's always served me. I'm the only musician I know that hasn't got a DUI. And I'm 66 and I've been drinking for most of them years. But I've never got a DUI. I've always listened to that little voice that's, don't go out tonight. I wrote a song called You Got an Angel on Your Shoulder, and I sure do.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I should have bought it a couple times, and here I am.
Here you are. Paul, how can people find you and your books on Amazon, The Legendary Pine Barrens? What?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's on a couple other sites, and they can always get a hold of me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. It's Paul Evans Pedersen Jr., or in parentheses, Paul Evans, because I always played by Paul Evans. My first record was released Paul Evans. Or they can get a hold of me on email. I can give them my email address if they want to get a hold of me. It's Cookbeaux, COOKBEAUX I'm still on AOL.com.
One of the last holdouts. And I'll put links for all of your stuff on.
I'm sorry, one more. Downthepines.com.
Downthepines.com. Okay, great. I'll put all of the links on Hey Human Podcast so that people can find it easily as well. Paul, this is great. I could hear stories from you all day. I love this kind of thing.
Yeah, I got to have a good feeling between us.
Yeah, thank you for...
When I talked to you the first time, I heard it right away.
Oh, thanks. Same. Yep. Paul, thank you so much for your time today and the great stories. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and also...
I enjoyed it.
Thank you for your service as a fireman. I think that's a big deal, and thank you for that too.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed working in the fire service. It's very rewarding.
Yeah.
When you weigh the good and the bad, the good wins.
Amen. That's I sure hope so. That's what I'm rooting for, at least.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.